Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into the muddy boots of a medieval peasant, just in time for the worst pandemic in European history. You live in a small, thatched roof village, nestled between fields of barley and not-so-hypoallergenic livestock. You think life is hard now? Try waking up to a world without plumbing, antibiotics, or even a decent pair of socks. Crows circle the sky above, watching. The wind carries rumors like dandelion fluff, stories of a dark sickness sweeping across distant lands. It started far away, somewhere no one you know has ever been, but it's spreading, westward faster than a rumor at the market stall. You try to ignore it. After all, someone's always dying somewhere, and you've got your own problems, like fixing the leak in your roof and not getting whipped by your landlord. But you feel it. It starts not with screams, but with silence. The kind that hangs in the air when something's coming, like a storm no one can see but everyone smells. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, post your location and local time. I love seeing how far we travel together. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Tatki. Ground is soft beneath your feet, too soft, it's rained again, of course it has. You trudge through muck that tries to claim your boots, headed toward the church because word is Father Edric's back from town and brought strange news. You pass under the low wooden beam of the village alehouse. No one's laughing inside. That's weird. You feel a chill, and it's not just the wind that picks up. There's a stillness, like the woods themselves are holding their breath. Inside the chapel, it smells like damp wood, candle wax, and worry. Father Edric's voice shakes as he speaks. The pestilence has reached Avignon. You don't know exactly where that is, somewhere in France, but the word pestilence makes your skin crawl. You glance at old Marjorie beside you. She's muttering a prayer and fingering her rosary like it's a sword. You want to ask questions, but no one moves. No one speaks. Until finally, little Edwin, the miller's boy, whispers, "Is it coming here?" No one answers. Days pass. You try to brush it off. Maybe it's just another faraway disaster, like the Mongols or that time the sea froze weirdly. You still have pigs to feed, firewood to chop, and your neighbor's goat keeps escaping into your turnip patch. But something's different now. The tradesman from the next village over stops showing up. The tanner's apprentice hasn't been seen for a week. Rumors trickle in with travelers. Black swellings, fevers, death in a day. You laugh nervously and mutter something about spoiled ale. But you don't believe yourself. The worst part? No one really knows what it is. Some say it's a punishment from God. Others think it's a foul wind from the east. One elderly shepherd insists it's because of a royal eclipse 6 months ago. The sky blinked, and so shall we. Historians still argue whether the average peasant had any real understanding of disease at this point. Most scholars agree they didn't, but some suggest a surprising awareness of patterns. You've noticed that the people who handle the rats? They tend to get sick first, but you don't say that out loud. You don't want to sound like a heretic. Then one morning you hear coughing. Not the normal kind. Deep, wet, ragged. It's coming from inside the carpenter's hut. His wife has hung a cloth over the door. You see smudges of red on it. You keep walking, quickly. The village starts to quiet. Market day is canceled, not officially, but no one shows up. The church bell rings more often and always for funerals. You avoid the bell tower now. Too many tolls. The smith's daughter, a girl who once threw a chicken at you during midsummer games, is suddenly gone. You ask about her, but her mother just shakes her head and won't meet your eyes. One night, a dog howls nonstop. The next morning, the baker boards up his house. No one asks why. You start sleeping with your shoes on. The fear becomes physical. You feel it in your shoulders, in your clenched jaw, in the way your hand flinches when someone coughs nearby. You wash more. Well, relatively more. You rub your skin with vinegar and salt. It burns. That's supposed to be a good sign. You keep your head down, your mouth shut, and your prayers frequent, even if you're not entirely sure they're being heard. And yet, oddly, there are moments of peace. The stars still shine. Your neighbor still waves at you, though from a distance now. The oxen still groan in the fields, oblivious to human plague politics. One morning you spot a little flower growing through the thatch of your roof. It's absurd. You laugh. You cry. Then you go back to chopping firewood. The world's ending, and someone still needs to keep the hearth warm. You know it's real now. You don't know what it is, but it's real. And it's coming closer. You wake to the rooster's cry, same as always. Only today it sounds more like a warning than a greeting. The sun filters through the slats of your shuttered window, and outside the world looks unchanged, but you know better. The air carries a tension you can't quite name. It's not the wind, not the chill, not even the smoke curling from the smithy. It's the quiet, the kind that wraps around your village like a fog and tells you something has gone terribly wrong. Still, you go about your day. You always do. That's life as a medieval peasant. Survival doesn't wait for plagues. You fetch water from the well, careful not to touch the bucket rope where someone else's hands might have been. You walk past the communal oven, where the bread line is half as long as usual and no one's talking. You nod at the reeve, the village official. He doesn't nod back. His wife has been coughing. You weren't exactly living a dream life before. All this started. Your home is a wattle and daub hut with a dirt floor and no chimney. Just a hole in the roof that smoke pretends to escape from. The walls are patched with mud and straw, and your family shares the space with a goat that you've named Not Dinner. Though honestly, that name is starting to feel optimistic. Each day is labor. You rise before dawn, shiver through the frost, and toil in the fields planting barley or pulling weeds. You know the feel of wet earth under your nails and the burn of a day's work in your shoulders. You're not poor. You're peasant, rich, which is to say you have a second wooden spoon. Meals are simple. Dark bread, porridge, onions, maybe a bit of cheese if you're lucky, and meat only on feast days or when something conveniently dies. And you owe everything to your lord. Literally. You rent your land from him in exchange for labor, loyalty, and a chunk of your crops. If he says plow, you plow. If he says march, you hope your shoes survive the journey. You are bound to the land just as your father was, and his father before him. But now the Lord's messenger hasn't ridden through in over a fortnight. No new taxes, no new demands. That should feel like freedom. It doesn't. It feels like the system is crumbling. The church, once your source of order and meaning, starts to falter too. Father Edric used to thunder from the pulpit about sin and virtue. Now his sermons are quieter, more desperate. He talks about wrath and redemption. He urges you to confess, just in case. Just in case what? Someone whispers once. No one answers. Historians still argue whether village peasants, in the 14th century, truly understood how much their society depended on structured labor and religious routine. Some think the average peasant lived in a bubble of faith and soil. Others suggest you were more aware than scholars have assumed. After all, when your world shifts even slightly, you feel it in your bones. You remember that time the harvest failed. One season without grain and everything unraveled, hunger, theft, fear. This is worse. But life doesn't stop just because death is looming. There are still animals to tend, fences to mend. You find small comforts. Your mother hums while she spins wool. You laugh when the goat eats your brother's sleeve. You carve a little face into a turnip, half for amusement, half for protection. Don't judge. Desperate times, desperate vegetables. Some villagers begin wearing charms, bits of cloth soaked in rosewater or sprigs of lavender. One man carries a dried toad in his belt pouch and swears it keeps evil spirits away. It doesn't. Smell like it helps. You overhear that a village downriver has burned their entire pig pen to appease the stars. Another blamed a group of traveling minstrels and ran them out with pitchforks. You think about how people need something to blame, something they can see and name. You're not sure who or what to point your own finger at. You keep working, though. The rhythm of planting, tending, harvesting, it grounds you. But the fields feel emptier now. Fewer hands, fewer songs. It's not just the sickness, it's the waiting. One evening, as you walk back from the field, you see a girl drawing shapes in the dirt with a stick. She's muttering something, almost like a spell. You ask her what she's doing. Trying to keep it out, she says without looking up. You don't ask what it is. You know, you remember a rumor, more hopeful than terrifying for once. Supposedly someone in Florence survived by locking themselves in a wine cellar with cured meats and nothing but their own singing voice for company. You briefly imagine doing the same, but the only wine you've got is vinegar, and your voice wouldn't scare away a rat, much less the plague. The days stretch on. Some are so normal you forget. Others are nightmares with open eyes. The Reeves' wife dies. The baker's youngest son disappears. No one talks about it, but you know he didn't run away. You think a lot about death now. What it smells like, what it sounds like, how it waits in corners you didn't know your home had. Still, there's strange beauty in it all. The trees bloom, heedless of human grief. The stars wheel overhead in their ancient silent ballet, And one night, while walking alone, you see fireflies dancing by the edge of the woods. For a moment, everything feels okay. Then the wind shifts and you smell something sharp, metallic. You realize it's not the forge. It's coming from the tanner's place, and the tanner hasn't opened his door in days. You keep walking. That's the truth, isn't it? You survive by walking forward, one foot, then the next. You survive by pretending tomorrow exists. Even when everything in you whispers that it doesn't, you wake up to scratching. Not the comforting kind, like the chicken pecking the floor for crumbs or your sister trying to write with the blunt end of a stick again. No, this is sharper, faster, almost purposeful. You sit up on your straw-stuffed mattress and look toward the far corner of your hut. A rat stares back at you. Big, sleek, with tiny black eyes that seem a little too smart for comfort. You lunge, half-heartedly, and it disappears through a hole in the wall like it's late for a meeting. You've seen rats before, of course you have. They're part of the scenery like mud, church bells, and tax collectors. But lately they're bolder, more of them. You spot them darting across your path, squabbling under the grain bins, even dancing. Yes, dancing atop the thatch roof like they own the place. You joke about it with your neighbor. Maybe they'll start paying rent soon. She doesn't. Laugh. You don't know it yet. But this is where it starts. The worst of it. Those rats, just trying to live their best plague-spreading lives, are carrying passengers, tiny, hopping, blood-hungry fleas. And those fleas? They're carrying something else. A bacteria, Yersinia pestis, though no one will call it that for another 500 years. What you do call it, when the fevers start, when the swellings rise, when the bodies turn black, is the pestilence, or God's wrath, or sometimes just it. Historians agree that fleas, likely carried by black rats on trade ships from Asia, were the primary vehicle for the Black Death, but they still argue whether it spread faster through bites or by respiratory droplets once the pneumonic strain mutated. Either way, you can't see the thing that's killing you. You can only see its messengers, and they are multiplying. You watch the rats scurry between the alehouse and the church. You watch them climb over the barrels behind the baker's shed, and you begin to associate their presence with a sinking feeling. You can't prove it, but your gut is louder than your priest these days. Soon, you notice the dogs chasing the rats have gone missing, or maybe they've just stopped barking. You used to hear them every night now. Silence. One day you watch your younger cousin poke a dead rat with a stick. He grins like he's just won a prize. 2 days later, he's dead. It happens fast. First he's pale, then hot, then moaning. Then there's a lump, like a plum under his arm. It turns dark, then darker. You try not to look. You try harder not to smell. You burn the straw he slept on. It's not enough. The local healer offers some wisdom. Don't touch the rats. Then she spits on the ground and mutters a charm. You want to ask her what good that'll do when the rats live in your walls, but you hold your tongue. She's the best you've got. She also suggests hanging a sachet of dried flowers over your door. So you do. It smells like lavender and desperation. As the days pass, rats become a sign. A warning. One scurries across the church threshold during Mass and half the congregation screams. Another crawls up into the grain store and is found chewing. Through the flour sacks, an entire week's bread gone. You try traps. You try poison. Well, more like old beer and spoiled cheese mixed with herbs. Nothing really works. The rats are smarter than your traps, and less picky than your goat. You start sleeping with your feet tucked tight under the blanket. You dream of scratching, of tiny teeth, of whispers in the dark. A friar passing through tells a strange story. He says in some cities people have started blaming cats, that they're rounding them up and burning them in great pyres to purge evil. He shakes his head. Fewer cats means more rats, he mutters, then adds, but people will do anything when they're afraid. He's right. You've seen people spit at pigeons, cover their mouths with musty rags, and pray to obscure saints you'd never heard of before, all to escape something they can't even see. And yet, no one's sure. What to blame? The sky? The foreigners? The air itself? One old man insists it's caused by eating leeks out of season. You humor him, mostly because his leek soup is actually decent. Quirky as it sounds, some of the villagers start sleeping in trees, just in case. They think maybe the sickness won't climb that high. You think it's ridiculous, until you notice fewer of them getting sick. The rats are clever, but maybe they haven't mastered tree ladders. Yet, you find yourself whispering things to the rat you see in your hut each morning. Little threats, little bargains. You stay over there and I won't scream. It feels stupid, But everything feels stupid now, and somehow talking to a rat is less insane than pretending this will all pass. One night, you find a nest. A whole rat family hidden beneath the floorboards. Pink, wriggling pups and all. You look down at them, heart pounding. Part of you wants to smash them. End it right there. But another part, tired, aching, maybe too soft, just walks away. You tell yourself they'll leave on their own. They won't. The infestation gets worse. You hear gnawing in the beams above your bed. You see a tail vanish into your neighbor's cooking pot. You help carry out a body from a hut where the rats had chewed through the bedding. And the fleas? You start itching. Everyone does. A constant, crawling feeling you can't shake. You scratch until your skin breaks. You see others do the same. It's not just nerves anymore. One day you catch a flea in your palm. Tiny, harmless looking. You crush it without a thought. But you wonder if that little pop, that tiny smear of blood, belonged to you, or someone else entirely. The idea of death being small enough to sit on your skin, that's the most terrifying thing of all. Still, you keep going. What else is there? You feed the animals. You boil your clothes. You scatter rosemary under your bed. You pray. And you try, hopelessly, to ignore the sound of scratching in the walls. The air smells wrong. It's not the usual village stench, manure, smoke, and too many humans packed into too little space. No, this is sweeter, cloying. The kind of scent that settles in your throat and makes you want to gag. It's the smell of sickness, of rot, of bodies that haven't been moved fast enough. You cover your mouth with your sleeve, but it doesn't help much. No one's quite sure what to do with the dead anymore. The usual customs, candles, prayers, the slow tolling of the bell, are starting to slip. The priests can't keep up, and the grave diggers? Well, they're dying too. So now, the bodies are piling up behind houses, in carts, in fields, wrapped in bedsheets or not at all. You pass one on the way to fetch water. A girl your age, curled as if asleep beneath a pear tree. No one's come to move her. You don't either. You start stepping carefully, not out of respect but out of fear. It's said you can catch the pest just by standing downwind of a corpse. Historians still debate whether medieval peasants fully understood the contagious nature of the plague, or just followed instinct. Avoid the dead, burn the clothes, run if someone coughs. You believe the latter. You don't need science to tell you what your gut already screams. Don't get too close. At first, the parish priests try to keep up the rites, but the line of the dead grows faster than they can chant. Father Edric's voice cracks during one mass burial. He's down to a whisper by the end. You wonder how many prayers you can fit into a single grave. Soon, they stop ringing the bell. For every death, it tolls once a day now, just a grim reminder. Still happening. Burial customs begin to shift out of necessity. The graveyard behind the church was full 2 weeks ago. A fresh trench is dug just beyond the village walls, far enough away to keep the smell from the Lord's manor, not far enough to make you feel safe. You help dig once. Just once. The spade bites into damp earth and you try not to look at the bundle you're lowering. A child. You don't know whose. You say a prayer, not because you believe it'll help, but because silence feels worse. After that, burials become a kind of group effort. If someone in your household dies, you wrap them yourself. You carry them, you find space. Maybe you burn them if the wind is right and the wood isn't too wet. Cremation isn't common, not in this time, not in this faith. But when you're out of holes in the ground, fire starts to look holy. The church disapproves. You burn anyway. There are moments of strange, grim creativity. One man builds a wheelbarrow just for the dead, rolls it through the village at dusk. He calls out softly, as he passes, "Bring out your kin." You watch him collect the body of your neighbor's wife, a stillborn wrapped in linens and a man so bloated with plague his skin splits like overripe fruit. Another family tries sky burial, laying their loved one on a wooden platform high in a tree, hoping the birds will carry the soul away. The platform breaks on the third night. The body lands with a thud that echoes through the village like a bad omen. You stop looking out your window at night. One morning, you wake to hear someone singing. It's a lullaby, soft, broken. You peer outside and see an old woman cradling a corpse, her daughter maybe, rocking back and forth. She doesn't stop when it starts raining. She just keeps singing. Eventually, someone leads her away gently like you'd move a sleepwalker. The body stays there until nightfall. Then there's the cart. You've seen it before. Big, wooden, drawn by a donkey who looks like he's considering early retirement. but now it has a new role. Twice a day it rolls through the village collecting the dead. The man who drives it doesn't speak anymore. He used to joke. Now he just hums. The cart creaks past your home, and you realize you know almost every person on it. The widow with the bent back, the baker's boy, the quiet girl who used to leave flowers on the church steps. You start losing track, and with the dead come the stories. One man claims he saw a woman who rose up mid-burial and walked off into the woods. Another says that if you stare too long into a corpse's eyes, you'll see your own death reflected back. You don't test that one. There's a whisper going around about plague pits in the cities. Mass graves so deep that people just toss, and the dead like garbage. Supposedly in Avignon, the Pope had a trench dug so wide they burned lime to keep the smell down. You picture it. A canyon of bodies. It doesn't feel real. Not yet. But your trench is growing, and the smell is changing. Deeper. Sweeter. A boy from the next village over says they're using the old dry well to dump corpses now. He says he saw a foot sticking out. You stop drinking from the well. One day, a nobleman rides through. He doesn't get off his horse, doesn't speak. He wears a scarf soaked in vinegar over his nose and holds a pomander to his face. You wonder why he came at all. Probably to see if you were still producing grain. You aren't. Still, he nods once and rides away, like he's seen enough. That night, you dream you're in the cart. You wake up gasping and clutching your own arm to feel if it's still warm. It is. For now. You start to notice things. Who still closes the eyes of the dead? Who still whispers names? Who's gone completely silent? You notice that the birds have stopped singing and still life goes on. People wash clothes in the stream, carefully upstream from the grave trench. A boy tries to play the flute. Someone repairs a fence. You plant a seed and try not to wonder who will be alive to harvest it. There's a cruel kind of rhythm now. Death, burial, rest. Death, burial, rest. You stop asking why. You stop asking when it will end. You just keep digging. You start noticing who's not around anymore. The village isn't silent, not yet. But the usual hum of chatter, clatter, and clucking has thinned like soup stretched too far. There's space between the sounds now. Strange little gaps where someone should be scolding their pig or shouting about missing firewood. You pause more often, wondering, wasn't there a man who sold candles here? There was. You remember him? Now Redbeard smelled like wax and garlic. Gone. And then there's the smith. You liked him. Broad-shouldered. Laughed like a cartwheel hitting a rock, always smelled of iron and onions. When your shoe buckle snapped, he fixed it without charging you. Last week he was still hammering in the forge. This week there's smoke curling from his chimney, but no sound. No clang. No curse. No singing. You knock on his door. No answer. You try again. Lighter this time. Like maybe your gentleness will protect you. Still nothing. The door creaks open on its own. You leave. There's a new fear now. Who's next? And an odd shame in surviving. Like you've been picked for something awful but exclusive. You start carrying little tokens. A sprig of rosemary behind your ear. A wooden charm carved by your brother. Superstitions bloom like wildflowers. One woman swears by wearing her husband's underclothes inside out. Another eats nothing but apples and ash. You try a few things. Garlic chewed raw. A dab of pig fat behind your knees. Who's to say what works? Historians still argue whether medieval people truly believed in these folk remedies or just clung to routine like a raft in a storm. But you? You believe in trying. And trying feels better than waiting. You find yourself avoiding people you love. Not out of dislike, but the opposite. You sit farther away at meals, speak across rooms, stop hugging. Your younger brother doesn't understand. He cries when you won't tuck him in. That night, you sit outside the hut, back against the wall, listening to him sob. You try not to. Cry too. It doesn't work. People start dividing into camps. Those who deny the plague, those who run from it, and those who accept it like a bad winter. Something to be endured with grit and onions. You're somewhere between the second and third group. Running sounds nice, but where would you go? The next village is worse off. The woods are full of bandits and bears. And you're not about to ask the nobles for refuge. You're not that desperate. Yet, you hear about entire families locking themselves in their homes. No visitors, no trips. Outside, just waiting. A kind of living burial. Some survive, others, well, eventually someone has to open the door. One day a man appears in the square wearing a robe made entirely of sackcloth, ash smeared across his face. He walks in a slow circle, whipping his back with a bundle of thorny sticks. With each strike, he chants a prayer. The villagers gather silently, watching. Some nod. Others look away. He's a flagellant, you later learn. A member of a group that believes punishing their own bodies will cleanse the world's sins. You feel a chill, not because he's wrong, necessarily, but because part of you understands. You stay up late that night thinking about guilt. Your own, your villages, your countries. There must be a reason for all this, right? Some divine accounting. It can't just be rats. The priest, pale and tired, preaches that this is God's judgment. Repent, he says, his voice cracked like old wood. Confess. Cleanse your souls. You confess twice that week. You tell him about stealing eggs, about not praying, about wishing the noble's horse would trip and break its royal leg. He listens. Then he touches your forehead with shaking fingers. God sees the effort, he whispers. You try to believe him, but belief is a flickering candle these days. Your dreams are full of strange things now. Red rivers, weeping statues, chickens that speak in riddles. You wake with a jolt most mornings, then lie still, checking yourself for signs, fever, lump, anything. You're not sure anymore if you're healthy or just between illnesses. Then there are the rumors. You hear that in the city they've begun blaming strangers, foreigners, beggars, lepers. Some say wells were poisoned. Others say it's the Jews. You've seen men whispering in corners, clutching knives in fear. It doesn't feel far away. One afternoon, you catch your neighbor watching the tinker's cart roll through the village. His eyes narrow. The tinker is new, not from around here. You sense something hard in the air, like flint scraping steel. You hope it doesn't spark. Violence doesn't always look like war. Sometimes it looks like a hungry man blaming someone else for the empty pot. Still, there's warmth. One evening, as the sun bleeds orange over the fields, the baker's daughter sings while kneading dough. It's a low song, not meant for anyone. You pass by slowly, listening. The smell of bread is so normal it nearly breaks you. You sit on a rock nearby and cry quietly while she sings. You don't speak about it later. Some things don't need words. That night you dream of feasts, real ones. Apples, venison, honey on bread. You wake up chewing air. Your stomach growls. But for once you don't mind. Hunger is proof of life. The days stretch long and strange. No two the same, yet all a little too familiar. The sun still rises. You still chop wood. You still count chickens. And every so often, you laugh. It catches you by surprise. Someone slips on mud. A goat eats someone's hat. A fart slips out during silent prayer. And in those moments you remember, you're still human. You hold tighter to that thought than you do to your charm. By now the death rate is slowing. Maybe because most of the vulnerable are already gone. Maybe because you've all gotten better at dodging it. Maybe, just maybe, it's easing. But you don't celebrate. Not yet. Instead, you sit quietly with the baker's daughter one evening, watching the smoke from her chimney curl into the sky. Neither of you speaks, there's nothing to say. Just the comfort of a living person sitting beside you, breathing. And for the first time in weeks you think maybe, just maybe, you're going to make it. You don't realize the plague is easing, until someone starts sweeping the street again. It's not formal or ceremonial, just old Agnes with a birch broom, muttering under her breath and scowling at the dust. You watch from the doorway, one eye squinting at the sunlight, the other fixed on the way her broom drags slowly across the packed dirt, raising more of a fuss than it solves. Still, it's something. For weeks, everything smelled like sickness. Now the air holds a hint of damp soil and burnt bread. That's progress, right? It's hard to say. The priest is still alive. That's your new benchmark for village health. He's thinner, paler, and his sermons have taken on a sort of dreamy sadness, like he's already got one foot in the afterlife and can't decide if he's impressed or disappointed. But he's preaching again. Every Sunday, people are coming, too. At first, they stand apart, awkward clumps of villagers who haven't looked each other in the eye in weeks. Grief and suspicion are sticky things, and they hang thick in the silence between hymns. The flagellants are long gone. So are the Yao, rumors of poisoned wells and vengeful outsiders, but the feeling lingers. Who's to blame, and deeper still, why not me? Historians still argue whether medieval communities grew closer after the worst waves of plague, or tore apart at the seams. In your case, it's a slow, fumbling kind of reconnection. People nod more, speak a few more words. Someone even shares. Soup. You're not ready to forgive the world, but you're willing to sit beside it again. You find yourself noticing things you'd forgotten mattered. The way the bell rings a little clearer now. The small green shoots clawing up between the stones. The sound of the cows mooing lazily from the pasture. Even the chickens seem less traumatized. There's a moment, small and stupid, that sticks with you. You're fetching water again because of course you are, and the bucket slips from your hand and splashes your skirt. Instead of swearing, you laugh. The sound comes out loud and sharp, like you've just remembered how. Someone nearby snorts in response. It feels like sunlight cracking through a boarded window. One of your cousins comes to visit. You didn't know if he was still alive. Turns out barely. His village lost half its people, and they burned the church when the priest died, and no one wanted to touch the body. He talks about it like it happened to someone else, sitting with a mug of warm ale staring at nothing. You let him stay in the loft. He wakes screaming twice in the night. You don't ask what he dreams about. You already know food is still scarce. The fields were left half-planted, the animals didn't breed like usual, who would under that much death? But there's enough to survive, and the Lord Steward finally appears one afternoon to sniff around the village and count what's left. He looks unimpressed. Your father mutters, "Too bad he didn't catch it." You pretend not to agree. The steward doesn't linger. He scribbles in his ledger, makes a few threats about next year's taxes, and gallops off with a sneer. You imagine him trying to boil a shoe for dinner when winter comes. It helps. The manor isn't untouched by the plague despite their fancy herbs and imported wine. One of the servants whispers that the lady of the house died in her bath, blood leaking from her nose like she was weeping red tears. Another claims she's alive and just hiding, face disfigured, hair gone. Either way, the curtains stay drawn. Back in the village, people are rebuilding in fits and starts. One man repairs the roof of his barn with pieces of another barn. A woman redigs her herb garden and talks to the soil like it owes her answers. Children chase each other again, their games darker now. Mock funerals, dramatic deaths, over-the-top wailing. You wince the first time you hear it, then realize they're laughing. You start to gather in small groups. Just a few people, around fires mostly. You talk about the ones who didn't make it, quietly like their names still echo. You mention the tanner who used to sing when he worked, the midwife who always smelled like lavender, the boy who carved animals from wood and left them on windowsills. You try to remember the sound of their voices. Someone brings out a lute one evening. The strings are warped and the tune's crooked, but it doesn't matter. Music feels holy now. You tap your foot in time and almost dance. Almost. You dream less often now. Or maybe you just sleep deeper. Your body's still thin, but your color's back, and your legs don't ache from walking short distances anymore. The fear sits farther away now, still there, but dulled. You catch yourself smiling once and don't feel guilty. One day you wake and realize no one has died in a week. It feels like a trap. Like if you say it out loud, the plague will hear and come rushing back in a cloud of fleas and curses. But others have noticed too. You see it in the way they move. Faster, more freely. Less like mice, more like people. The priest holds a special mass. He calls it a Thanksgiving. You call it cautiously optimistic. You all bring what little you can. Dried apples, smoked fish, flatbread. You sing a little. You cry a lot. There are no sermons about judgment this time. Just a long silence held together by shared breath. Afterward, you walk home with someone's hand in yours. You don't know whose and you don't let go. That night there's a storm. Rain lashes the roof. Thunder rolls like giants bowling above the clouds. And you sleep through all of it. For the first time in months, you dream of nothing at all. That's how your neighbor describes it. Just before his cousin from the next village nails their door shut from the outside and walks away without a word. You think it's barbaric, until your own mother suggests something similar when your little sister starts coughing. Quarantine, peasant style, has no polite rules or wellness check-ins. There's no, "How are you holding up?" from the other side of the wall. It's a hard, creaky door slammed closed, timber planks hammered into place, and a whispered prayer that whatever's inside stays inside. You don't quarantine to get better. You quarantine to die quietly. It starts with whispers. Always the whispers. Old Jacob hasn't left his hut in 4 days. The miller's wife is burning things in the yard again. That red cloth tied to the fence, when you know what it means. You're supposed to mark your home with a strip of cloth if someone inside is sick. Red for fever, black for death. Of course, many don't bother. The cloth only invites the hammer and the boards. When it hits your family, the village council doesn't come with healing words. They come with tools. You and your father argue, quietly, but not quietly enough, over whether to tell anyone. He insists it's just a spring fever, but by the next morning your uncle is slumped over the table, eyes wide and unfocused, bowl of stew still steaming in front of him. No one touches it. The carpenter is the one who seals your door, not out of cruelty. He's crying the whole time. He mutters that he buried his own daughter last week, that this is mercy. He gives your family a loaf of bread, a jug of water, and nails it shut. 1, 2, 3, each blow echoing like a church bell. It's dark inside, even during the day. The shutters are closed, and you barely dare to crack them open. Every sound outside makes your heart lurch. Is it a neighbor, the priest, or just another dead cart rolling by? You try not to think about the smell. It creeps up from the floorboards, from under the stairs, from your uncle's bed. You sprinkle herbs, lavender if you're lucky, just plain hay if you're not. Your mother burns dried rosemary and mutters half-remembered prayers. None of it works, of course, but it gives your hands something to do besides shaking. You ration the bread carefully, slicing it into smaller and smaller pieces each day. Hunger gnaws at your belly like a worm. You learn to chew slowly, to drink only when your lips crack. Your little sister asks if this is how rich people fast for the saints. You lie and say yes. Time becomes slippery. Days fold into one another. You wake up, sit in silence, and fall asleep again, all without moving more than 10 steps. You dream strange things. Forests full of bones, talking dogs, a church made of glass that shatters every time you open the door. Some nights you talk about running, about slipping out the back and dashing for the woods. But where would you go? Another village? Another locked door? The fear out there is just as sharp as the fear in here. Besides, the rumor is that the bailiff now patrols the woods, hunting deserters like rabbits. Historians still argue whether these early quarantines were enforced by official decree or just local panic. In your case, it's the same difference. A week in, your sister stops coughing. You wait another day, then another. She laughs. It's a sound so out of place it feels like thunder in a snowstorm. Maybe she's recovering. Maybe it wasn't the plague. Maybe this is just an awful spring. Your uncle is still dead, though. That fact doesn't unhappen. Eventually, the boards come off. No fanfare. No crowd. Just the carpenter again, this time avoiding your eyes. He steps back, axe still in hand, ready to reseal if he has to. You step into the sun, blinking like a mole. The world outside has shifted. The village feels emptied. Not entirely, but thinner. The air is too still. Chickens roam unsupervised. One of them wears a crude cloth mask which you suspect was someone's idea of protection. You can't decide if it's hilarious or horrifying. Maybe both. Someone yells, "They made it!" from across the square. It's the potter's boy, waving, both arms like he's seen a ghost. You smile and wave back even though your legs tremble. Survival feels like theft, like you got away with something you weren't supposed to. As days pass, more households creak open. Survivors blink in the sunlight, looking half-starved and wholly confused. Conversations restart in hushed tones, like everyone's afraid too many words will bring the plague back. No one talks about the locked doors, but everyone remembers them. Quarantine didn't save everyone. In some houses, they opened the doors to silence and decay. In others, a single gaunt figure shuffled out like a shadow. But in your case, it worked. Maybe not cleanly, maybe not fairly, but you're alive. There's one thing you notice now. The doors that used to swing open for gossip, bread deliveries, or just a peek at the weather now shut more carefully. Every creak sounds like a warning. Every cough gets a second glance. You and your sister go for a walk down the lane one morning, just to move, just to see something that isn't the inside of your own skull. At the edge of the woods, you find a tree with a red ribbon tied to it. You don't go further. The church bells have fallen quiet. You hadn't even realized it until someone pointed it out. No tolls for morning mass. No mournful knells for the dead. Just silence. It's unsettling, like the village has lost its heartbeat. You shuffle into the chapel anyway, mostly out of habit, partly because there's not much else to do. The air inside is thick, not with incense, but with dust and neglect. Pews sit half empty. The priest's chair is vacant. The altar cloth hangs, limp. You wonder if anyone's even lit a candle in days. Faith is supposed to be your anchor, right? That's what they always say. Trust in God and all will be well. Except well is nowhere to be found lately. You know people who pray until their knees bleed and still end up on the cart. And then there's Thomas the tanner, who swears, drinks, and curses the saints daily, but somehow he and all 7 of his children are just fine. You sit near the back and watch as a few others trickle in. No sermons today, no Latin chants echoing off the stone walls, just hushed mutterings, private prayers. You hear one woman begging Saint Sebastian to shield her family. Another swears to give up gossip forever if God just spares her son. You try to think of a worthy bargain, but your brain feels fogged. What could you possibly offer? The village had 2 priests once. Father Alric was old and kind. He gave you stale honey bread and let you peek at the church's one illustrated Bible. He's gone now. Took ill after last rites for a blackened corpse. The other priest, Father Brennus, has vanished altogether. Some say he fled to the monastery. Others whisper he joined the flagellants. You haven't decided which version feels worse. Without the clergy, the church becomes something else. Less divine institution, more community center with holy decor. People still gather, but now it's to share news, pass rumors, and sometimes just cry where no one judges. One day a man you've never seen before stands at the altar and begins reading from a tattered scroll. It's not Latin. It's something else, maybe a psalm, maybe a poem, maybe just comforting nonsense. No one interrupts, no one questions it. Everyone just listens. For 10 minutes, the chapel breathes again. You learn that the church's power doesn't come only from its teachings. It comes from its presence. The towering stone walls, the painted glass that still catches morning light in red and blue bursts, the carved saints, some with chipped noses and crooked halos, still watching with stern, silent eyes. They don't flinch, they don't flee. They're still here. Outside, the churchyard tells a harsher story. Graves are packed tighter now. The usual ceremony, prayers, bells, the slow tolling of names, has been replaced with speed and shovels. Sometimes there's a cross. Often there's just a pile of earth. You see someone try to fit 3 names onto a single wooden marker. It's a tight squeeze. You volunteer to help bury one afternoon, not out of piety, but because your hands itch for work and your thoughts need distraction. You dig beside an older woman who hums hymns while she shovels. She says she used to sing in the choir. You ask if she still believes. She shrugs and hums louder. There's a bitter irony you can't shake. The very institution that preaches eternal peace is now too afraid to touch the dying. Church doctrine insists the soul must be blessed before it passes. But with no priests left, who gives the blessing? A child? A baker? A friend? Historians still argue whether unofficial blessings were accepted as legitimate during the worst years of the plague. In your village, it doesn't matter. No one's keeping score anymore. Still, some cling harder to faith than ever before. They gather at dawn to chant. They wear charms, scapulars, relics, even one boy who ties a dried mouse around his neck, swearing it's a fragment of St. Cuthbert's holiness. Spoiler, it's not. You catch your mother sewing tiny crosses into everyone's tunics. She does it quietly, humming, not expecting conversation. When you ask what it's for, she says, "It can't hurt." That seems to be the new doctrine. Now, do whatever might help, no matter how odd. One afternoon, you pass by the church and find someone has scrawled a warning on the wall in charcoal. This is God's punishment. It's smeared and misspelled, but the message is clear. A few days later, someone else adds a response beneath it. Then why do the innocent die? No one dares erase either. Debates bloom in the marketplace like unwelcome weeds. Some say, the plague is punishment for sin. Others claim it's a test of faith. Still others argue it's a natural affliction, though they usually get shushed quickly. The church has a long memory and short patience for heresy. You attend one of the last sermons before the chapel finally closes its doors. A traveling friar gives it. He looks more bone than man, wrapped in a cloak too big for his frame. His voice is hoarse, but his message is simple. Be kind, forgive quickly, and pray often. Then he vanishes before sunset, leaving behind a single worn sandal on the church steps. After that, the chapel becomes a storeroom. Crates of herbs, shrouds, candles, and preserved pears fill the pews. You still visit sometimes, sit in the back, watch the light dance on the floor. You don't always pray, but you think, you remember, you hope. In the end, you realize the church's grip isn't gone. It's just changed. It no longer shouts from pulpits. It whispers from memory, from habit, from old songs hummed while digging graves. Faith, like plague, finds its way into every crack. You wake to the smell of smoke and something sharp, maybe rosemary, maybe someone's fear. Outside, the village has transformed into a bizarre apothecary. People are lighting fires in the streets, not for warmth, but to drive away bad air. You wrinkle your nose as someone tosses a bundle of dried dung onto the flames, chanting something that sounds suspiciously made up. Welcome to medieval epidemiology, where the line between healing and hocus pocus is blurrier than your eyesight. After drinking pond water, everyone has a theory about what's causing the plague. You hear one old man say it's the stars, another says it's the Jews, and someone else claims it's definitely the toads this time. You side-eye a frog near the well and decide not to take chances. The most popular belief is that the disease comes from miasma, foul air rising from swamps, graves, and probably your neighbor's laundry. So people carry pomanders, little balls, filled with spices, flowers, even vinegar-soaked cloth. You make your own using mint, apple peel, and a pebble you're pretty sure is just a rock. But it smells decent. That's half the battle. One woman walks around with a bouquet shoved up her nose. She says it's the only way to keep the stink out. You try it for 10 minutes before sneezing yourself dizzy. Astrologers offer their two pennies, naturally. They say Saturn and Jupiter are in conjunction, and that's never good. One traveling sky reader declares that the alignment is proof of divine wrath. He even draws you a diagram using a stick in the dirt. It looks like a chicken scratched it out mid-dance. Still, everyone nods solemnly. Stars don't lie. After all, you visit the healer's hut because why not, really? She's got dried herbs hanging from every rafter and a table full of things you'd never willingly eat. She offers you a paste made from crushed snails and pine resin. You ask what it does. She winks and says, hopefully something. That's reassuring. She also recommends rubbing a cut onion on your armpits. Or was it a garlic clove in your shoe? You forget the order, but try both just in case. You smell like an angry stew pot, but no plague yet. So maybe it's working. Historians still argue whether these cures were sincere efforts at medicine or just rituals to feel some control. Honestly, standing in a room full of sage smoke while chanting about Saturn's vengeance, it feels like control, even if it's not. Some people take things further. You hear about villagers burning entire homes if someone dies inside, believing the walls themselves hold disease. One man even sets fire to his chicken coop after 3 of his birds sneeze. You're not sure chickens sneeze, but you don't question it. These days, fear wears many hats. Then there are the scapegoats, suspicious midwives, foreigners, herbalists with too many odd bottles. A young woman in the next village is accused of witchcraft because she survived after feeding her entire family dandelion soup. You met her once. Her only magic was knowing how to boil water. One afternoon, a boy runs through the square yelling that someone found a cure. Everyone gathers. It's a dead chicken, tied to a man's foot. The fever will pass into the bird, the man explains proudly, as the chicken lays there looking, well, dead. No one questions how a dead animal can absorb anything. You just watch as he drags it around like some grotesque talisman. Another rumor says drinking crushed emeralds works. You wonder who can afford that. Maybe if you steal a ring off one of the corpses. Kidding. Mostly. A local widow swears by wearing a dead toad in a pouch over her heart. Her house smells like wet cave. You smile and nod when she offers advice. Then go home and bathe in a bucket of rosewater and guilt. Then come the charms. People wear medallions, hang herbs above doors, and recite protective chants. One child has a leather pouch tied around his neck. When you ask what's inside, he says, "My grandma's toenail." You decide not to ask further. You try making your own charm. A bit of string, a pebble from the stream, a prayer whispered into a knot. It's nothing, and yet, it's not. You feel a little safer with it on. At night, you hear the wind howl, or maybe it's someone moaning down the lane. You clutch your makeshift charm and murmur a rhyme someone taught you. Ash and nettle, salt and sage, keep foul air and ghost in cage. You feel silly. But then, what isn't silly anymore? You remember a time when logic ruled your thoughts, when you believed in things like cause and effect. Then a neighbor who lived clean, prayed daily, and never wronged a soul dropped dead mid-laundry. And a drunkard who sleeps in hay and spits at the saints keeps waking up just fine. So yes, you wear the onion, you burn the sage, you rub vinegar on the dog and call it protective measures. Because what else are you going to do? There's no royal decree guiding your survival. No medical school sending experts. Just you, your wits in a drawer full of increasingly pungent roots. The healer visits your family again, this time with a charm she says she copied from a monastery scroll. It's just a triangle of wax stamped with a cross. She says to hang it over the hearth. You do it. Of course you do it. A week passes, no new coughs, no more fevers, you don't dare celebrate. But you start to believe, just a little, that maybe some of this strange behavior is working. Or maybe you're just lucky. Or maybe, as that astrologer once whispered to you with wild eyes, fate rolls its dice and we just guess the numbers. Whatever it is, you keep guessing. The sound reaches you before the sight does, a low, wooden groan, like a wheel reluctant to turn. Then the rhythmic squeak follows, echoing down the lane. You know the cart is coming before you see it. You know what it carries. You step back instinctively, pressing yourself against the wall of the thatched house behind you. The dead cart turns. The corner. It's pulled by a single tired mule and guided by a man in a hooded cloak, face hidden, posture sagging. Some call him the collector. Others call him that poor sod. You call him what he is. The man who takes away the people no one else can bear to touch. The cart is only half full today. That's a good sign, if you can call it that. Yesterday it was heaped high with limbs and cloth and what you think was someone's wedding bonnet soaked dark and matted. You hadn't meant to look, but you did. No one volunteers to help anymore. Not since Marta tried and got sick 2 days later. That's how superstition works. Fast, firm, and unforgiving. So the collector works alone. Sometimes he stops to knock on a door. If no one answers, he goes inside. If someone does answer, he offers a quick nod, says nothing, and wheels his cart on. Today, you spot the baker's boy being lifted out of his house wrapped in a ragged blue shroud. Just yesterday, he gave you the last crust of burnt rye in exchange for a smile and a wink. You grip the wooden wall behind you harder than you mean to. You wonder who makes the carts. Someone must. They weren't built for this. They creak under the weight, axles bending, handles cracked and repaired with twine. You half expect one to collapse mid-journey. Maybe it already has. There are no bells, no psalms, no farewell letters, tucked into sleeves. Just bundles of cloth and silence, except for the flies. They buzz thickly around the cart, drawn like greedy merchants. You swat one away, then immediately feel guilty for caring more about the fly than the boy. The plague has turned death into routine. Once, a death meant days of mourning, candles lit, prayers said, neighbors bringing stew and comfort. Now it's a glance out the window and a whispered name, quickly crossed off in your mind before it hurts too much. Sometimes people leave bodies outside to be collected. Sometimes they tie a strip of cloth to the door to signal what's inside. Black cloth means plague. White cloth means old age or mercy, though mercy's been in short supply lately. A few villages over, someone came up with the idea of hanging garlic over the doors of the healthy. That lasted 3 days, until someone died mid-hanging. You follow. The cart at a distance, just to see where it goes. Not because you're morbid, though maybe you are now, but because you're curious. Because what else do you have to do? It leads you to the edge of the forest, where the burial pit yawns wide and ugly. It wasn't there a month ago. Now it stretches like a scar across the earth, long and deep, reeking of decay and desperation. The collector doesn't pause. He tilts the cart. The bodies tumble in. Some are wrapped, some are not. A hand lands sideways, fingers splayed like it. Still wants to hold something. You feel your stomach shift. Not from hunger for once, but from something heavier. You've seen animals die. You've even helped dig graves before. But this is something different. This feels like forgetting. Like the world has decided to stop remembering. You turn away before the last body falls. On the way back, you pass 3 men digging another pit. One whistles while he works. Another spits into his palm and keeps going. You ask if they're scared. The whistler shrugs and says, "Better digging than being in the dirt." You want to laugh, but it catches in your throat. Historians still argue whether these mass graves were truly unavoidable or simply the fastest, cheapest option. But standing at the edge, you don't care about academic debates. All you know is that no names are carved, no stones are set, and no one will ever come to weep at these sites. Yet still, some try to hold on to meaning. That night, your neighbor's daughter dies. She was just 9. You help the family wrap her tiny body in her favorite shawl, the one with embroidered daisies. Her father insists on burying her in their garden instead of sending her to the pit. He digs until dawn. You stay and hold the lantern, your hand trembling the entire time. When he lays her in the earth, he kisses her forehead once, then turns away before the tears can find him. The next day, you carve her name into a piece of wood and place it near the soil. It's crooked. The letters are uneven, but it's something. Small acts of rebellion, you think, against forgetting, against fear. Someone tells you of a village where they tie bells to the dead, so that if anyone stirs, the collector hears. You laugh. A nervous, awful laugh. Then you wonder if it's true. Others have begun building shrines at the edges of the pits. Just piles of stones, or a candle lit under a tree, or a child's toy left beside a mound. You start seeing them more, often. Quiet signs that people still care, still feel, even when the world has lost its voice. The dead cart still rattles through the village every morning. You don't flinch anymore. You just watch. And sometimes, when no one's looking, you whisper the names of the ones you remember. Not because it will save you, but because they deserve not to be forgotten. You sip a concoction that smells like burned grass clippings and regret. It's your third remedy this week, and each one has been more questionable than the last. Today's features crushed emeralds, yes, actual gemstones, pulverized into a chalky powder that now coats your tongue like minty gravel. The apothecary, who seems to invent cures as he goes, assured you it would balance your humors and draw out the bad air. You nod politely. What else are you supposed to do? Because here's the truth. No one knows what they're doing. Not the apothecaries, not the midwives, not even the bearded university types in their long robes and fancier Latin. The plague laughs in every direction, and the remedies keep getting weirder. You remember your neighbor rubbing a paste made from crushed rose petals and human urine onto his chest. He was so convinced of its power he made a second batch for his goat. Neither made it. Then there's the live chicken method, in which the bird is strapped, wings flapping and all, to the buboes on your body, under the belief it will suck the poison from your flesh. You've seen this attempted more than once. Chickens do not enjoy the process, and neither do the people wearing them. Still, these oddities spread fast. When someone doesn't die immediately, their treatment becomes gospel by morning. The widow across the lane wore a dead toad around her neck and survived. Coincidence? Maybe. A miracle? She certainly thinks so. Now half the village sports some kind of amphibious accessory. You draw the line at reptiles. Every household reeks of something now. Burning herbs, vinegar-soaked rags, garlic tied in strings around doorways. Some folks even coat their nostrils with treacle, hoping to block the invisible bad air that floats in from God knows where. Miasma theory, they call it. A fancy term for air gone evil. Historians still argue whether people truly believed the plague was in the breeze, or whether it was just the only explanation left when the bodies started piling up. Then there's the sound. Coughing, wailing, the occasional burst of holy chanting. But the worst is the silence. When a house goes quiet for too long, you know it means death has already passed through. You try to keep your hands clean, not because of germs. You don't know what germs are, but because it just feels like something you should do. Water mixed with ash becomes a crude soap. You scrub until your knuckles sting. You wash again after touching anything even remotely suspect. That includes most people. Personal space becomes a survival tactic, not a courtesy. One day, a traveling merchant stumbles into the village, peddling snake oil in tiny glass vials. He calls it essence of saintly breath, bottled in the shadow of a holy relic. You don't ask how breath is bottled. You're too busy wondering whether he really saw 4 villages burned to the ground to purify them of infection. He sells out in 2 hours. Your friend, well, maybe more of a friendly neighbor, tries something different. She carves strange symbols into wooden charms and hangs them from her doorway. Protection runes, she says, taught to her by her grandmother, who once survived a fever that killed all the sheep. You don't argue. She hasn't caught the plague yet. You hang a charm too, just in case. You start to notice something else. People stop shaking hands. They bow, nod, sometimes awkwardly bump elbows. These tiny shifts in behavior feel like a kind of collective shrug. No one says they know how to stop the plague, but everyone agrees it's probably better not to spit when you talk. One afternoon, a group of villagers gathers near the chapel. Word spreads that a stranger is offering a new kind of cure, something with crushed pearls and saffron. Sounds expensive, sounds ridiculous. Still, the queue stretches around the square. You go, more for the company than the cure. Try this. 1, the man says, handing you a lump of something soft and green. Boil it in wine. Inhale deeply. You take it because you always take it. Because when death lives in your shadow, even absurdity feels like armor. Back home, You try it. You boil the lump in a chipped pot, lean over the steam, and breathe. It smells like spoiled soup and lawn. You gag once, twice, then sit down by the hearth and wait for a miracle that doesn't come. At this point, survival feels random. You take the cures not because you believe, but because it feels better than doing nothing. Doing nothing makes you feel like a walking target. Even humor starts to shift. Jokes turn dark. Someone quips that if the plague doesn't kill you, the potions will. You laugh, but too hard. It's either that or cry. You dream of better remedies, of real doctors, of knowledge that doesn't involve frogs or fire or drinking something that looks suspiciously like ink. But those are dreams for another world, another century. For now, you reach for the next bizarre cure. You swallow it, and you hope. The first time you see them, you think they might be actors. Bad ones at that. Shirtless, shoeless, and smeared. In dried blood, they march into town like some grotesque parade, chanting Latin hymns between sharp cracks of leather on flesh. It takes you a moment to realize they're whipping themselves, not just once or twice, but over and over with studded cords, raising welts and open wounds down their backs. They call themselves the flagellants, and they are most definitely not here to entertain. You stand with a small crowd at the edge of the square. No one talks. The only sounds are the snap of whip against skin, their mournful chanting, and the distant clang of the chapel bell, almost like it's ringing in warning. A thin, sunburnt man with a patchy beard leads the group. His eyes look fever-bright and his voice booms like a cracked church organ. "We suffer for the sins of the world," he shouts. "God will forgive us if we bleed." The others echo his words as if rehearsed. Then, more whipping. It's mesmerizing, horrific, a little theatrical. And yet, you feel something shift in the crowd. Some people bow their heads, others fall to their knees. A few openly sob. You're not sure if it's the spectacle or the desperation. Probably both. The flagellants stay for 2 days. They sleep on straw and eat nothing but crusts and water. Every few hours they beat themselves again. They refuse shelter, refuse coin, refuse anything resembling comfort. Pain is purity. One of them mutters to you, flinching as he brushes against a hay cart. You ask him why they came. He winces. "Because your village is next." You don't sleep well that night. By dawn, they're gone, onward to the next unlucky town. But their echo lingers. A few villagers try whipping themselves. You hear the soft cries behind closed doors. Even the priest seems shaken, offering a sermon the next morning that stumbles and spirals into muttered warnings about wrath, fire, and a God with very little patience. It's not just the flagellants. Fanatics of all stripes begin to slither out of the woodwork. A woman in blue robes claims she hears the Virgin Mary speaking through her goat. The goat is not especially articulate, but she draws a crowd. A pale man in tattered furs declares that eating only raw onions will cleanse your soul. He smells exactly how you'd expect. Desperate people do desperate things, and there's something contagious about spectacle. You find yourself drawn to it. Like maybe if you watch long enough, some kind of meaning will drop into your lap. Like maybe the shouting man bleeding in the square has the answer everyone else missed. Historians still argue whether the flagellants were ever taken seriously by the church, or if they were just tolerated like street performers with extra bruises. Either way, their numbers grow for a while. You hear of processions 100 strong, moving from city to city like a tide of pain and fear. Of course, not all fanatics are quite so theatrical. Some come with books. You see a man reading scripture in the tavern, shaking his head after every line like it personally offends him. He tells anyone who'll listen that the plague is a test, not a punishment. "Pass the test," he says, "and you'll be saved." You ask him what the test is. He doesn't have a clear answer, but he's very confident you're failing it. Then, there's the end is nigh crowd. People who walk in circles around the village green repeating the same phrase over and over. A few are former merchants, others once respectable townsfolk. Their eyes are glassy, their hair is wild. One of them used to mend your boots. You try not to look directly at them. Your friend, the one with the carved charms, decides to join a vigil. She spends 2 days fasting and praying in the field near the river, convinced a vision is coming. On day 3, she comes back sunburned, dizzy, and convinced that sparrows are sacred. You humor her. Who are you to say they're not? Fear makes people creative and malleable. A boy down the road starts drawing symbols in the mud, convinced it keeps the sickness away. His parents make him stop after someone accuses him of witchcraft. A miller's wife insists she saw a shooting star and now refuses to eat anything that hasn't been blessed. She blesses turnips. She blesses porridge. She blesses the dog. One afternoon, a newcomer arrives in robes so white they practically glow. He carries no bag, no food, just a long wooden staff and a voice like thunder. "This is your final warning," he bellows in the market square. "Repent. Cleanse yourselves. Burn the evil." He doesn't say what the evil is, but later that night someone's pig pen is set on fire. No one admits it, but everyone suspects it was connected. The next day he's gone, just vanished, like smoke. The pig is not so lucky. You start to understand something uncomfortable. Belief, untethered from logic or compassion, can get very dangerous very quickly. One wrong rumor and someone ends up beaten, banished, or worse. You've seen the signs: scratch marks on doors, strange stains near wells, neighbors suddenly missing. The line between healer and heretic gets thinner by the hour. But there's also something oddly comforting in it all. In the face of plague and death and uncertainty, people do. They chant, they bleed, they scream, they light candles. They make up rituals with bits of string and bone and faith. They find meaning even when none exists. You, though, you sit quietly, most nights watching the stars. You don't whip yourself. You don't bless the goat. But you do light a candle, and sometimes you whisper to it, just in case. You wake to silence, the kind that presses against your ears and makes your skin prickle. Outside, the village is still, too still. The air hangs heavy, and even the birds seem to have taken the day off. You step outside, clutching your thin cloak tighter around your shoulders, and glance down the path toward the manor house. It's empty. The gate stands open, the door ajar. A flag still flutters weakly above the tower, but there's no smoke curling from the chimneys, no servants moving in the courtyard. The Lord and his family are gone. At first you don't believe it. Nobles don't just leave. But then you hear it from the stable boy. Well, former stable boy now. "They rode out at dawn," he says, kicking at the dirt. "Took the fast horses. Said they'd return when things were settled. Left the rest of us behind." You're not surprised. The plague doesn't care if you own land or dirt, but rich folk have options. They escape to their country manors, their hunting lodges, their private little fortresses far from coughing peasants. You have turnips, a goat, and a window stuffed with rags. The manor sits like a ghost now. You sneak inside once just to see. It feels wrong, but curiosity is louder than guilt. The tapestries still hang, stiff with dust. Half-eaten bread rests on a wooden plate. Someone knocked over a wine goblet in the rush, the red stain seeping into the rug like a wound. You pocket a silver spoon. You're not proud, but these are strange times. The villagers gather that evening. No official meeting, just people drifting into the square with questions and no answers. The steward tries to maintain order, barking about temporary leadership and duty. But everyone knows he's just another servant who didn't get invited to ride off with the Lord. You wonder who's in charge now. Maybe no one. And that's the frightening part. No Lord means no protection, no guards, no supplies from the outside. The next cartload of grain might not come. The next doctor, assuming you ever had one, won't be showing up. The thin thread connecting your muddy life to the rest of the kingdom has snapped. You're on your own. For a while, the village tries to act normal. Sort of. The baker still fires his oven, though with less flour and more guesswork. The blacksmith sharpens tools no one wants to buy. And the tavern still serves ale, watered down and sour, but it's something. You spend a lot more time in the fields. Not because they're productive. Half of them are fallow now, and the other half are suspiciously quiet. But because it's better than sitting in your cottage waiting for the next cough. You pull weeds, check traps, dig holes for nothing in particular. The goat follows you around, chewing things it shouldn't. And yet, amid the slow-motion collapse, you start to notice strange little flickers of freedom. With no lord around to enforce the rules, people begin testing boundaries. A woman moves into a better cottage after its owners die. No one stops her. A few families start trading directly with outsiders, bypassing the old manor-controlled markets. Someone plants herbs in the church garden, muttering, "Well, he's not using it." Even the taxes seem to vanish. At first, you expect the steward to show up demanding grain or coin, but weeks pass and no one comes. The village reeve shrugs. When asked, "What am I going to do, write a letter to a corpse?" He smiles, a bit too cheerfully. The old order is wobbling, and part of you likes that. Still, it's not like you're living the good life now. The plague still lurks. Supplies run low. You've eaten the same bland porridge 3 days in a row, and you're starting to eye the goat in a more culinary way. But there's a quiet shift in the air. No lord, no whip, no tithes. Just you, your hands, and a little patch of earth. One evening, you help a neighbor fix her roof. The shingles are warped, the thatch moldy. You patch it anyway, using rope. And stubbornness. No one pays you and you don't ask. She gives you a loaf of bread and a wink. You call that fair trade. You start seeing more of that. People helping because there's no one else. The widow down the road starts organizing food shares. A boy and his uncle take over butchering duties for the village after the actual butcher dies. You even find yourself teaching someone how to plant onions, which is ironic considering yours all rotted last season. Historians still argue whether these tiny, self-reliant communities were the seeds of something bigger, early signs of peasant independence or just temporary scrabbling during chaos. Either way, it feels different. One night, you pass the manor again and see candlelight flickering inside. For a moment, your heart jumps. Have they returned? But no, it's just the steward, sleeping in the kitchen. He doesn't say much these days. As you walk home under a moonless sky, you think about the old ways. How much of your life used to be controlled by someone who thought of you as less than livestock? And now? Now you pull your own cart. You chop your own wood. You bake your own uneven bread. It's terrifying. And a little thrilling. And tomorrow, you'll do it again. You don't notice right away when the burial priest stops showing up. At first, it's just one funeral with no formal rites. The village chalks it up to a scheduling mix-up. Maybe he's busy tending to the dead in another parish, maybe he's sick, or maybe he just needed to lie down for a bit and never got back up. Either way, the priest is gone, and the dead keep coming. So you bury your friend yourself. She was your neighbor. Not particularly close, but you'd exchange soup during lean weeks and gossip during slow ones. You found her curled under a blanket, still warm, a cup of ale spilled on the floor. Beside her, no sign of pain, just gone. It's the strangest thing, digging a grave for someone you half knew and never really thought about dying. You try to follow the rituals, whisper the usual prayers, lay her with a few herbs, say her name 3 times. But it feels like guessing. You try not to notice how shallow the grave is. The ground is hard, you're tired. More die in the coming days. The village carpenter, 2 children, a peddler passing through who collapsed mid-sentence. There are no sermons, no bells, no incense, just silence, digging and whatever scraps of dignity you can summon with a bent spine and dirty hands. At some point, someone says, "We should say something." So you do. Not grand speeches, just memories. He liked pears. She told the best stories about ghosts. He owed me 5 chickens. It's not liturgy, but it feels real. The death cart stopped too. They were never consistent. Just a rickety wagon dragged by people too broken to care. But now they're gone entirely. No one's collecting anything. No one's keeping count. You become your own undertaker, your own mourner, your own priest. One morning, the chapel doors are nailed shut. You don't ask who did it. It's probably for the best. And it isn't just the dead. The whole idea of proper burial starts to unravel. There aren't enough coffins or candles or people. Graves pile too close. Sometimes in the far field you catch the sharp scent of lime and burned cloth. You turn away. Historians still argue whether these mass graves were organized responses or just acts of desperate necessity. What's certain is that your hands grow calloused, your back sore, and your sleep uneasy. The dirt under your nails doesn't wash out anymore. And the dreams, oh, the dreams, become heavier, filled with names you never meant to remember. One man, a quiet elder who used to mend fishing nets, insists on being buried with a small wooden comb. For the afterlife, he says. You oblige. Another woman requests that no one touch her body when she's gone for fear it'll trap her soul. You try, but it's hard to move someone respectfully when rigor mortis has already set in. You start to wonder, who will bury you? It becomes a running thought whispered behind bread ovens and field furrows. Who's left to dig the last grave? What happens when no one remains to carry the body? Will you rot in your bed? Will someone mistake you for sleeping and just leave you there? One night you wake up and can't feel your arm, you panic. Is it the plague? You've heard it starts with numbness, or maybe that's just gossip. Turns out you just slept on it wrong. You laugh. A wild, cracked laugh that echoes off your cottage walls like a curse. You start prepping, just in case. You lay out a clean tunic. Tuck a charm under your pillow. Write your name on a bit of parchment and tie it to your wrist. It's grim, but somehow comforting. You're not the only one. The village begins to adapt. A young woman with a soft voice takes over leading prayers at burials. No one calls her priest, but they start asking for her when someone dies. She wears a blue scarf and hums during the digging. It's oddly peaceful. Someone builds a communal grave near the orchard surrounded by small stones. It's not sacred ground exactly, but it's orderly. People start bringing flowers, little carved tokens, a woven doll. Someone even leaves a wedge of cheese. For all the horror, there's something beautifully human about how you cling to these rituals, how you make meaning out of dirt and silence. No incense? Burn some dried lavender. No holy water? Use the river. No psalms? Sing whatever comes to mind, even if it's off-key. There's a strange story going around. A fringe rumor, probably. But you hear it more than once. Some villages have started tying bells to the wrists of the newly buried, just in case they're not fully dead. You can't decide if it's terrifying or genius. You suggest it at a burial once. No one laughs. Still, you keep doing it. Day after day. You dig, you cover, you whisper, and it changes you. You begin to see the world differently, not just in grief, but in gratitude. You look at your surviving friends like miracles. You savor every bite of stew like a banquet. Even the gray, rainy mornings feel precious, because you're still here somehow, and you'll be the one to bury the next person. And maybe, someday they'll bury you. But not today. You didn't expect to fall in love during the plague. It starts small, because everything does now. A glance held too long over a shared loaf of bread. An extra potato slipped into your basket. A laugh that surprises you, raw and sudden, in a world that hasn't been funny for weeks. You don't even know what to call it. Love? Affection? Desperate? Affection in an age of mass death? Whatever it is, it's real. And it finds you when you least expect it. They're not someone you'd have noticed before. Maybe you passed them 100 times without thinking. Maybe you'd heard their voice, once during a festival half drunk on watered wine. Now their every word seems to echo inside you. It's the plague, you think. It's warping your brain. But that doesn't stop the feelings. You work together, helping build a new chicken coop, or mixing herbs for someone's cough. The world is so empty now, it only takes two people to feel like a crowd. You steal moments. When no one's looking, whisper things you don't fully understand and make promises you might not live long enough to keep. In a world where tomorrow feels like a myth, today becomes sacred. You kiss once, behind the grain store, in the cold. It's not the kiss of a storybook. Your lips are dry, your breath smells like onions, and you both flinch at every cough from across the village. But it's yours, and it matters. You still lose people, friends, cousins, strangers you only ever nodded to. Grief moves in like a lodger who never pays rent. But now it's not just your grief, it's shared, split between two shoulders instead of one, and that changes everything. Some nights, you talk about what could come after, what you'll do if you both survive. Maybe we'll move to a town, they say, with the kind of dreamer's voice that has no business in a world like this. Open a little bakery, or a dye shop, something with color. You laugh, not because it's silly, but because it's beautiful. Of course, not everyone thinks this way. Some people have turned cold, even cruel. You see a man you used to respect beat his dog for no reason. You hear rumors of a widow accused of stealing turnips, tied to a post until the chickens pecked at her shoes. Love isn't the only thing rising in the ruins. Fear has its own flowers, ugly ones, but there are others like you, finding each other in the cracks. You see a couple getting married in a half-collapsed chapel. No priest, no witnesses except two goats and a child picking their nose. They exchange carved rings, rough wood, uneven edges. They laugh when one ring gets stuck. Later that day, they help bury the groom's brother. Love is practical now. It's bandaging a wound, saving the last slice of bread, sleeping near each other for warmth but facing opposite directions in case someone starts coughing. It's ugly and awkward and honest. Historians still argue whether marriages increased or decreased during the plague. Some records suggest fewer official unions, while others hint at a quiet surge in makeshift pairings, people coupling out of necessity, protection, or fleeting joy. You like to think it's all of the above. There's a moment, just a tiny one, that sticks in your mind. You and your maybe partner are walking by the river. The sun is finally out, the grass squelching underfoot, and the sky dares to be blue. You see a single red flower poking out of the mud. It shouldn't be there. It's the wrong season, the wrong soil. You both stop and stare. No one speaks. And in that stillness, something unspoken passes between you, deeper than vows. You decide to pick the flower. You dry it, press it in a book you haven't opened since last year. One day, maybe you'll forget where it came from, but not yet. Not while you're still surviving. Love during plague time is different. It's not about grand gestures or endless letters. It's about who helps you clean the pot when you're too tired to stand, who doesn't flinch when you sneeze, who stays. Sometimes it's not romantic at all. It's friendship that thickens like soup, a bond built in a field with muddy hands and tired feet. The old man who teaches you how to sharpen a blade. The girl who sits beside you and talks nonsense while you both peel turnips. Love in all forms shows up like stubborn weeds. And when someone dies, and they will, it crushes something in you. But it also sharpens the edges of your heart, makes you brave enough to try again. Because what else is there? You can't stop the plague. You can't dig enough graves. You can't pray the stars into better alignment. But you can hold someone's hand for a minute. You can share your last onion. You can whisper, "Stay with me," even when you know they might not. And sometimes they do. And sometimes you both wake up the next morning, still breathing, still aching, still here. That's enough. You wake to a silence so thick it hums, the kind of silence that presses against your ears and makes your thoughts echo. No church bells, no livestock braying, no footsteps on the dirt paths, just wind through hollow spaces and a few birds too stubborn to leave. You pull on your tunic, still damp from yesterday's rain, and step outside. Everything looks the same, yet unmistakably wrong. The field just beyond your cottage, normally dotted with workers hoeing, weeding, chatting between sighs, is deserted. The rows of turnips haven't been touched in days. Some of them have split open on the ground, rotting where they grew. There's no one left to harvest them. You tread through the brittle grass, eyes darting toward homes with doors ajar. That one belonged to the baker's family. That one to the woman with the 9 cats. All empty now. Or worse, you've stopped checking. The last time you looked into a silent house, you found an entire family huddled together in bed, as if sleep had simply overstayed its welcome. The cows have started bellowing again. They haven't been milked in 2 days, and they don't care about pestilence or divine judgment. They want relief. One tries to break through its pen, frantic and sore. You calm it with trembling hands and an apology. "I forgot you." You whisper, "I'm sorry." In a field farther off, a horse stands still with a broken harness, grazing beside a plow that's slowly sinking into the earth. It looks at you like you're supposed to do something. You want to tell it you're not in charge here, you're barely in charge of yourself. You and a handful of others begin gathering in small, silent pairs. No words, just work. Someone picks up a rake. Someone else starts chopping kindling. You don't assign roles, there's no one to give orders. It's instinct. Keep moving, keep useful. Don't stop long enough to think. A few younger boys chase chickens around the yard. It's the first laughter you've heard in weeks. Not because it's funny, just because it's a noise that isn't sobbing. Historians still argue whether this strange phase, when the plague loosened its grip, but the people hadn't returned, was a pause, a breakdown, or the beginning of something new. You don't know what to call it. All you know is that you're tired of waiting for someone to tell you what day it is, so you begin counting things. Not bodies. Not anymore. You count how many people still show up to the well in the morning, how many goats you can find that haven't wandered off, how many loaves of bread you can bake from a sack of coarse flour. If you stretch it thin and skip dinner, you miss sound. You miss arguing. You even miss that one guy who used to insist that boiled nettles could cure anything, even heartbreak. He was wrong about everything, but he talked a lot. You miss that? One day you come across a field that's been left to itself. Weeds, yes, but also life. Wildflowers where wheat used to grow. Bees bouncing from bud to bud like nothing ever happened. The sky is ridiculously blue, like a painter got lazy and just dumped one color across the whole thing. You sit in the grass and breathe. Just breathe. That evening, a man in a tattered wool cloak tells you he saw deer grazing at the edge of town. Dozens of them, bold as you please. No hunters left to scare them. No dogs barking. Just velvet antlers and soft hooves on soft ground. The world is moving on. Without you. Or maybe around you. Someone begins to tend the chapel garden again. Not because anyone's praying. Most people have complicated feelings about God right now. But because the mint keeps spreading like a rumor, might as well use it. It goes well with boiled peas. You and a few others begin to organize yourselves, informally. No leaders, just neighbors sharing what's left. I've got extra onions. My pig finally calved. The river's low today. Fish might be easier to catch. It's not a community the way it used to be. There are no fairs, no market days, no dancing around a maypole. But it's something. There's a boy, maybe 10, maybe less, who starts leaving drawings. Around the village. Bits of charcoal on scrap wood. Little scenes. A person with a big smiling sun over their head. A cow wearing a crown. A tree with eyes. No one knows where he got the idea, but no one takes them down. In the quiet, absurdity becomes a kind of joy. You keep working. You fix what you can. Patch the roof. Mend your boots. Try your best to milk a goat without upsetting it too much. It headbutts you anyway. You mutter a curse, then laugh. It feels good to laugh, even if your ribs ache from the empty fields whisper at night. Wind in tall grass, mice making tiny kingdoms in the abandoned grain stores. You listen, eyes half closed, wondering if this is how stories are born, out of silence and leftover things. The world has shrunk, but in its smallness, you notice more. The texture of bark, the sound of your own breath, the way your hands have become strange, hardened tools, the lines on your face that weren't there last spring. One evening you find a seed pouch buried under a pile of rags, turnips, barley, peas. You turn it over in your hands, feeling the papery weight of potential. You could plant them tomorrow, or not. But the fact that you could, that's something. You sleep that night with the window open. It's not safe, probably, but the air is warm and the sky is clear. Somewhere nearby, someone sings to themselves. It's off-key, it's perfect. You don't know what comes next, but you're here. Still breathing, still listening, still planting. You don't remember volunteering for this. One day you're hauling barley sacks and trying to fix the cottage roof with a bit of chewed leather and hope, and the next, you're cradling the neighbor's fevered child in your arms, wiping sweat from her brow with the edge of your own tunic. You'd laugh at the absurdity if it weren't so frightening. You are not a healer. You have no schooling, no herbs, and no real plan. Just a half-remembered rhyme about garlic poultices and a whole lot of desperation. But when the old midwife vanished last week, maybe fled, maybe fell ill, someone had to step up. And so, without asking, the village has decided it's you. You never even liked blood. The girl's mother died 2 days ago. The father won't come near. People are terrified, but the child was alone, and you couldn't just leave her. That's how most of these reluctant healers get started. It's not about noble purpose. It's about not being able to walk past someone dying without trying something. Anything. And now your hands are shaking as you try to soak linens in vinegar water like the merchant swore would help. Historians still argue whether vinegar truly had antimicrobial properties that slowed infection, or if it was just a placebo that smelled strong enough to feel like doing something. Doesn't matter to you, it's what you have. That and a boiled onion poultice, which at least keeps the worst of the stench away. People start coming to your door. First, it's a man with boils under his arms, asking if you've heard of rubbing butter mixed with crushed sage. Then it's a woman holding her sister's limp arm, whispering about a holy relic in the next town that might cure her. You're a brewer by trade, not a saint, but you nod and offer weak tea and a clean rag. And then, there's the boy. He's barely 10 and he's the last of his family. You find him sitting outside your door when the sky is just turning pink. He doesn't cry. He doesn't speak. He just stares at your hands like they might glow. You make him a broth and let him sleep on the floor. It's not healing exactly, but it's something. By now you've converted the shed into a kind of sick room. Straw laid out neatly, bundles of dried herbs strung across the beams. The smell is ambitious, mostly thyme, with a strong undertone of desperation. The village slowly begins calling it the hut. Not the healer's hut, just the hut. It has a life of its own. You learn as you go. You burn rosemary to purify the air. You bury used linens far from the well. You keep your own tunic tied with a strip of cloth soaked in lavender oil. Is it working? You don't know. You're still alive, which feels like an endorsement. One man swears by badger fat. Another suggests drinking your own urine. He says, monks do it. You politely decline. Some ideas you just let float away like so much wood smoke. And then there's the bleeding. Oh, the bleeding. A local lad read somewhere. Okay, he heard somewhere. that cutting open the swellings might release the poison. It doesn't. It just leads to more pain, and sometimes death. You try to stop that practice in your patch of the world. Quietly, gently. You don't argue, you just offer tea and a poultice and look sad enough that they listen. But you're not alone in this strange transformation. Across the country, people like you are becoming makeshift caregivers. Some scholars even claim that without this sudden rise of untrained peasant healers, entire villages would have gone completely unsaved. These reluctant healers fill the void left by dead monks, vanished doctors, and burned-out clerics. The funniest part? Some of you get good at it, or at least, good enough. You start recognizing symptoms before they worsen. You learn when to walk away, like when the coughing turns too wet or the skin too purple. That's when all you can do is sit beside them until they're gone. And yes, there are moments that are nothing short of miraculous. A girl who was given up for dead walks out of your hut 3 days later asking for stew. A man with sores all over his legs makes a slow but steady recovery, praising your magical turnip balm, really just mashed root with beeswax. You don't argue. Let them believe what they need to believe. One of the more fringe cures someone insists you try, wrapping the sick in red cloth head to toe. The theory is that red balances the body's humors. You try it once, mostly for the theatrics, and the person recovers. Pure luck? Almost definitely. But guess who's now known for their miracle? Red wrap someone, that's right. Your trending medieval edition. It's not a life you chose, this half-healer, half-therapist role, but it's the one you were handed when the world fell apart. And there's a strange dignity in it, even when it feels like you're just bailing water out of a sinking boat with a spoon. You've stopped waiting for the real healers to return. You've become one, whether you like it or not. You didn't know you were breaking the law. Most of the time, you're too busy trying to keep your nose attached and your stomach filled to worry about edicts. But the king's men ride through. One morning, muddy hooves churning up the common, and suddenly there's a parchment nailed to the church door with enough red wax to choke a goose. By order of the crown, it begins. Never a good sign. Apparently, there are now rules. Plague rules. Laws written hastily by frightened nobles far away from the stink and panic you live with every day. Some make sense. Others feel like punishment for surviving. One declares that any house with a plague victim must be marked with a red cross and boarded shut. You're not sure who's supposed to do the boarding. You assume it's not the plague victim. Another law says you can't leave town without a writ proving you're untainted. Of course, no one can say what untainted means. Or who gets to decide. A bishop, a magistrate, the guy selling boiled turnips by the bridge? It's not clear. There's also a new rule about burial. Graves must be 6 feet deep minimum. That's probably the smartest one yet, but digging that deep when your entire workforce is made up of children, widows, and one guy missing 3 fingers? Not easy. Historians still argue whether these burial laws were strictly enforced or merely aspirational, like promising not to scratch a flea bite. You do your best, but some nights the graves are shallow, and the prayers are whispered quickly, if at all. And then there are the punishment laws. A woman is caught selling fake plague, charms made from chicken bones and candle wax. She's whipped in the square and run out of town. Harsh, yes, but she was charging 4 pence a charm, and they didn't even smell nice. A boy steals bread from the Lord's storehouse, barely a crust, just enough to keep his sister from fainting. He's locked in the stocks, sick and coughing, for 2 days. By the time he's released, his skin is ash-colored. He doesn't last the week. Even minor things become crimes. Spitting in the wrong place, standing too close to a priest, refusing to carry a dead body cart. You hear whispers about whole villages being fined for hiding the sick instead of reporting them. But how could they not? Would you turn in your own brother? You start to see the laws for what they are. Not so much about safety, more about control, about fear, about showing who's still in charge when everything else has fallen to rot. One especially absurd law arrives in a burst of theatrical panic. No more public singing. Yes, that's right. Apparently someone decided that group singing disturbs the humors and may attract the plague. You smirk the first time you hear it. Later, when a band of traveling minstrels is chased out of town with stones, the smirk fades. Another law bans gatherings of more than 5 people unless it's for prayer. You find this especially funny since the church is where everyone seems to be catching the plague anyway. But you don't argue. You just count heads quietly when you pass a group. Meanwhile, the local lord builds a wall around his manor. Not metaphorically, a real stone wall. No one allowed in or out. He sends his steward to tell you that anyone approaching within 50 paces will be shot with an arrow. You decide to keep your distance. It's not like he was feeding you before anyway. Curiously, one of the fringe laws allows people to break curfew, but only if they're gathering herbs for healing. That you can work with. You start learning your night herbs. Wild garlic, valerian, yarrow. You move like a ghost through the meadows under moonlight, pockets full of fragrant hope. And that's not the only loophole. A traveling merchant tells you about a town downriver where the mayor declared himself immune by divine right. He holds public banquets to prove it. They say he drinks wine from the same goblets as plague survivors. Legend has it, he hasn't caught the sickness once. Historians debate whether this man truly existed or whether he's a stitched-together folktale, but you sort of love him anyway. Then there's the case of the Rat King trials. Apparently someone in a neighboring village put a rat on trial, yes, an actual rat, for spreading the plague. They sentenced it to death by drowning. You're not sure what's more absurd, the trial itself, or the fact that someone had tiny shackles on hand. But not all laws are bad. Some towns begin organizing designated body collectors paid in bread and ale. It's grim work, but at least the dead get buried, and the living get fed. Others set up isolation huts on the outskirts, offering real help rather than just locking people inside their homes. And here's something unexpected. A law is passed that gives peasants the right to demand higher wages. So many people are dying, there's no one left to harvest the fields or mend the roofs. Landowners, desperate and suddenly humble, are forced to pay more. It's not enforced equally, of course, but it plants a seed, one that will grow. You're still bitter about the singing band, though. So you live inside this shifting tide of rules, some helpful, some hopeless, some downright hilarious. You nod, you dodge, you bend when you have to, and at night you sneak out past curfew, herbs in your sleeve, quietly humming the songs you're not allowed to sing. You don't remember when hope started creeping back in, but it does. Not with trumpets or angelic choirs. No, that would be too dramatic for the likes of your little mud-caked village. It returns quietly like spring thaw, a baby's cry in the night, smoke curling from chimneys again, laughter, real laughter, behind the blacksmith shop. You think maybe, just maybe, this place won't vanish after all, so the town tries to rebuild. You're not sure if it's bravery or just exhaustion from grief, but people begin crawling, out from their hiding places, one by one. A door opens, a shutter lifts. The same old hunchbacked baker throws open his stall again, selling biscuits shaped like skulls. He calls them plague cakes, and somehow they catch on. Humor is part of healing, you suppose. It's not a coordinated effort, no town meeting, no royal decree, it just happens. Someone starts fixing the broken bridge plank by plank. Someone else scrubs down the chapel pews, humming despite herself. You rethatch the neighbor's roof while he lies inside, still coughing but improving. There's an unspoken agreement. If we act like it's not the end, maybe it won't be. The market restarts with only 3 vendors and a goat that keeps trying to steal turnips. A child sets up a game of knucklebones with just herself and 3 rocks. You give her a 4th. These little moments stack like bricks. Not flashy, but strong. And slowly, a new kind of village takes shape. You notice the changes. The old carpenter is gone, but his apprentice, barely 16, takes over the trade, hands steady, eyes too tired for someone that young. The widow who never left her cottage is suddenly running the grain count. People who once followed now lead, and no one questions it. Historians still debate how much of this village reshaping was deliberate versus desperate improvisation, but to you it feels natural. Like the bones of the place shifting and setting again, even the priest seems altered. He doesn't shout as much from the pulpit. His sermons are quieter, more reflective. One Sunday he doesn't speak at all, just lights candles and lets everyone sit in silence. You like that service best. Of course, not everything runs smooth. You try planting barley, but half the field won't turn over. Too many rocks and not enough oxen. The miller's wheel is broken, and the smith won't have new iron until the next merchant wagon rolls through, which might be never, and the ghosts linger. Not literal ones, though you swear you saw a shadow flit across the threshold one dawn, but memories. There are homes no one re-enters, belongings too painful to touch. A child's shoes by the hearth, a spinning wheel left mid-turn. There's one cottage that stays boarded up even after the smell fades. No one dares open it. You avoid walking too close, though you can't say why. Some things are better left. One night, a traveling minstrel arrives. He wears mismatched shoes and sings like a frog with a cough, but still, music. You haven't heard real music in what feels like years. He's welcomed like royalty. People cry. You cry. It's fine. No one mentions it. He sings a ballad about a plague that hit Rome centuries ago. It ends with everyone eating figs and dancing under the moon. That part gets a big laugh. You don't even like figs, but in that moment, you crave one more than life itself. Somewhere in this patchwork of rebuilding, a boy begins painting again. Crudely, with crushed berries and soot. He scrawls a scene on the side of the granary. People holding hands in a circle around a fire. It's lopsided. The faces are all wrong. It's perfect. There's still death. Not everyone makes it, not even now, but it comes slower, less greedy. You even get a day with no new sickness. Then two, you whisper thanks into the soil. You don't say it aloud. You're not about to jinx this, but you feel it in your spine. Some of the newer customs stick. People still tie herbs to doorposts, not because they work necessarily, but because the village agrees it helps in some invisible way. Like a prayer, no one has to say out loud. You wear your lavender pouch proudly, even if it mostly smells like mold now. And then there's the feast. No one calls it a celebration exactly. But one evening, the entire village gathers in the field where the maypole once stood. Someone roasts a pig. Someone else brews cider from last autumn's apples. You bring what little honey you've managed to coax from a skittish hive. There's food. There's dancing. Badly, offbeat, lots of ankle injuries. There are stories, jokes, and 3 people pass out from drinking too fast. The stars watch quietly above. The same stars that blinked over all the terrible nights before. You remember how silence used to sit heavy over this place. But tonight the noise is healing. It's not over. The plague might return. There are whispers of new waves, new variants, new misfortunes slinking along trade roads. But for now, your town stands. Not unchanged. Never that. But standing. And, for now, that's enough. You don't expect the world to feel different, but it does. Not louder or brighter. Just altered. Like someone tilted the horizon a few degrees when you weren't looking. The fields are greening again. The birds are back to arguing in the rafters. But something under all of it hums a new tune. You wake each morning and notice things. The way your neighbor, once so proud and untouchable, now shares bread without even being asked. The miller's apprentice laughs louder, like he's making up for every quiet day that came before. And you, well, you feel older. Not just in the bones, in the soul. So what changes and what doesn't? For starters, work. It's no secret that there are fewer hands to go around. And suddenly, those hands, your hands, matter. A lot. Landowners used to sneer at peasants like you. Now they lean forward, eyebrows knitted in desperation, trying to keep you from walking off to the next village with better wages and softer hay. You remember the first time someone offered you a whole chicken just to stay and shear sheep. You tried to play it cool. You failed. You hugged that chicken like it was royalty. It pooped on your shoe. Worth it. Wages rise. Not everywhere, not equally, but enough to notice. Enough to make some lords nervous. The statute of laborers gets passed, yes, an actual law from the crown trying to freeze wages back to pre-plague levels. Historians still argue whether this law was ever truly enforceable, especially in remote places like yours, where the only enforcement tool is a grumpy constable with one eye and a limp. The law doesn't stop people from bargaining harder, leaving cruel masters, or choosing to stay in places where they feel respected. It's not a revolution, but it smells like the warm-up act. Then there's the food. You used to live on onions, turnips, and whatever your goat didn't eat first. Now there's meat more often, honey sometimes, even fish if you're lucky, and the river feels generous. Some call it divine providence, you call it not having to share your supper with 20 other field hands. But not everything evolves. The mud, for instance, still clings to your boots, still floods your floor, still shows up uninvited no matter how often you sweep. Taxes. Oh yes, still unfair. The village reeve still counts your bushels with suspicious precision, as if you're secretly hiding golden apples under your mattress, and the church, well, it limps forward. The sermons get softer, the fire and brimstone vibe gets dialed down. But it's still the center of life. Still the place where you go to ask questions, even if the answers are as muddy as the path leading up to it. But something has shifted in people. They look each other in the eyes now. There's a shared understanding. In every nod, every awkward hug. You all went through something unthinkable and came out scraped, sure, scarred, definitely. But still here. And with survival comes strange boldness. A girl you barely spoke to before the plague now asks if she can apprentice in the forge. The smith, who once would have laughed her out of the yard, just shrugs and says, "If she can, swing a hammer, I don't care who she is." She can. She does. Old rivalries dissolve. The guy who stole your boots during a drunken brawl last winter now helps patch your fence. You consider bringing up the boots. You let it go. Then there's the songs. They're different now. Fewer rhyming tales of noble knights and more of healers, survivors, village girls who outwit death. One tune, called "The Last Bell," becomes a favorite. It's about the final toll of the plague bell in a town just like yours. It's sad but oddly comforting. You hum it while mucking the pigs. A local scholar, you call him Sir Knows-a-Lot because he owns 4 whole books, says the plague changed art across Europe. He claims styles shifted, perspectives warped. Everything became a little more human, a little more haunted. You nod politely, not really understanding the Latin but feeling the truth of it in your bones. Even festivals return. At first, they're cautious affairs. A maypole tied with gray ribbons. Bonfires that flicker nervously. But then the dancing starts. Someone brings out a flute. A child dares to shout, "More pie," without being shushed. There's joy in it again. Wobbly, imperfect, utterly genuine joy. You wonder if the dead are watching. You hope they are. Of course, there's talk of plague returning. Always talk. You hear rumors of ships from the east, of rats still lurking in grain stores, of spots on a merchant's neck. But the fear no longer paralyzes. You have routines now. Knowledge. A plan. You even have a special sickness corner in the cottage, stocked with garlic, dried sage, and that one rock your aunt swore kept evil at bay. It's possibly just a rock. Still, it feels right. So, you keep living. You tend the soil. You joke about death with gallows humor that somehow makes everyone laugh instead of cry. You listen to the birds, the wind, the occasional scream of a goat in distress, standard village noises. And one morning, as you stretch and feel the first sun of a new season on your face, you realize something very small, but very real. You feel possible. You've survived. You keep reminding yourself of that. Not just survived the Black Death itself, but the long dark after it, the loneliness, the fear, the aching spaces where neighbors and family used to be. Now the question becomes, what are you supposed to do with survival? It's a weird feeling being alive when others aren't. No one tells you how to carry that. There's no sermon about how to fold the memory of lost friends into your morning routine. No herb mixture for guilt that blooms suddenly while you're mending a sock or stirring a pot of pottage. It creeps up on you. You're planting peas in the spring thaw, and suddenly remember the boy who used to hum while sowing seeds 2 rows over. He's gone, and you've got his hoe now. It's got his initials on it. You run your thumb over the carved wood every time you pick it up. This right here, this strange ache, is something people start calling survivor's guilt. Of course, you don't have fancy words like that in your village. You just know that sometimes joy feels a little heavier than it should, like your laughter has someone else's tears stitched into it. Historians still argue whether survivors of the plague collectively suffered trauma in ways we'd recognize today, or whether they just buried it deeper the way people bury everything when life leaves no time to dwell. But you definitely feel it. The dreams don't help. Sometimes you wake drenched in sweat, certain you heard the death bell tolling again. Other times it's the face of your sister, pale and flushed, blinking at you from the edge of sleep. She never says anything, just looks. You never figure out if that makes it better or worse. You try to talk about it once, with the brewer, of all people. You're both sitting on a low wall, watching the goats try to eat a laundry line, and you say, "Do you ever? I don't know. Wonder why you're still here." He doesn't answer, just passes you the jug. Later, he starts making a sweeter ale. He calls it second chance. You think that might be his answer. Guilt shows up in unexpected ways. You catch yourself laughing too loud and immediately feel like you've insulted the dead. You hesitate to move into a nicer cottage because someone else used to live there, someone who doesn't anymore. You almost don't take the spare blanket your neighbor offers even though you're freezing because you think someone else might need this more. But then it hits you. No, they won't, because they're not here, and you are. That realization doesn't cure the guilt, but it changes its shape, makes it something quieter, something you can carry, instead of letting it crush you. People start sharing more. Stories, dreams, regrets, around the fire, in the fields, at the market. One old woman confesses she hid in her cellar for 10 days and let her chickens roam wild. "Worst idea I ever had," she says. Took 3 weeks to catch 'em all. Everyone laughs, even her. You talk to a boy who lost both parents. He says he wakes every morning waiting for someone to scold him for sleeping late. You nod. You know that phantom feeling well. Some people pretend nothing happened. They rebuild their routines with obsessive energy, scrub every surface, avoid eye contact when someone mentions the plague. It's a kind of survival, too. A bandage made of denial. You don't blame them. But others embrace the strangeness. A former shepherd becomes a storyteller. A midwife begins painting icons on wood. Beautiful, eerie things with wide eyes and curling halos. She says it helps her remember those she couldn't save. You start writing things down. Just a few notes on scraps of parchment. What the sky looked like before the sickness, how your father used to laugh. The name of the girl who gave you a blue ribbon once. You don't know why exactly. Maybe so it's not lost. Maybe because someone someday might need to know that these people lived. A part of you changes. You're more aware of the little things now. The sound of soup bubbling. The crack of firewood splitting. The rough texture of wool. They anchor you. Remind you you're still here. Still real. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, the guilt begins to mix with something else. Pride. Not boastful. Chest-thumping pride. Just a quiet acknowledgement I endured. Not unscarred, not untouched, but alive. One afternoon you catch your reflection in a puddle. You look older, harder maybe, but your eyes, they're yours. And they're looking forward, not back. That night, you find yourself smiling. Not because anything spectacular happened, just because the wind is warm, the stars are out, and the village dog hasn't barked in hours. You realize, for the first time in a long time, you feel at peace. You whisper a thank you into the silence, not knowing who it's for. Maybe no one. Maybe everyone. Then you tuck the blanket tighter around your shoulders, lie back against the cool earth and close your eyes. You'll dream again. Maybe of old faces. Maybe of something new. But tonight you're not afraid. You didn't ask for power, but here it is. Quiet, calloused, and completely unexpected. Life after the plague is strange like that. One moment you're hauling firewood, the next you're realizing that your voice, yours, matters in a way it never did before. Before the Black Death, peasants were just background noise to the lords and clergy, tools with arms and legs. Now, not so much. There are fewer of you, and that makes each one a little more valuable. It's a math problem the nobility doesn't like, but can't ignore. You're standing taller now. Not because your back stopped hurting, spoiler, it still does, but because when someone tries to take advantage of you, you can look them in the eye and say, no. And maybe, just maybe, they listen. A funny thing happens when enough people survive something together. They start asking questions. Why were we treated like dirt? Why did the priests run when we needed them most? Why are we still paying rent to a lord who hasn't set foot in this village since the fleas marched in? Some folks don't like those questions. The king, for one, is definitely not thrilled. The nobility tries to squash this growing confidence before it becomes something unruly. More laws, more taxes, more punishment for people who speak too loudly or demand too much. But the genie is out of the sackcloth bag. You notice it in small things first. A village meeting where people actually argue back at the reeve. A widow refusing to marry again just to keep her cottage. A group of field hands banding together and negotiating wages as a group. What nerve. Some historians call this the beginning of the end for the feudal system. Others say that's an oversimplification, and that the shift took centuries. The truth probably lies somewhere in the middle, tangled in barley fields and whispered between work songs. What matters to you is this. People are listening when you speak. There's still danger in it, of course. No one's handing out crowns to peasants. But the old system creaks a little. It's like watching a mighty oak sway in the wind. Still standing, sure, but no longer unshakable. And it's not just politics. The power shows up in everyday choices. I decide which master you'll serve, if any. Some peasants leave their villages entirely, taking jobs in towns, joining guilds, learning trades that once felt impossible. A thatcher's son becomes a scrivener. A plowman's daughter becomes a brewer and starts selling her ale 3 villages over. Her secret? Rosemary. Also, she's charming. You see it in land, too. A few families scrape together enough coin to buy the plot next door. Not lease. Buy. You never thought you'd hear a peasant talk about ownership with anything other than a bitter laugh. But here we are. Of course, not everyone rises. Life still plays favorites, but now when someone stumbles, there's a hand there to catch them. And it's often someone who used to be just as lowly. Survival has a way of softening people and sharpening them depending on the day. Your own days look different now. There's more variety, more decisions. You've taken up weaving in the evenings, just enough to sell at the market once a month. It started as a way to keep your hands busy when the memories got too loud. Now it's something more. Your fabric carries patterns only you know how to make. People ask for it. You never thought that would feel so good. Children play in the lanes again, their laughter echoing against cottage walls. Some of them weren't even born when the plague hit. They don't know what it felt like. To lose everyone in the same week, you envy them. You also protect them fiercely. The church is different too. Fewer priests for one. The ones who stayed or came back are often humbler. Less hellfire, more help. The new friar in your village actually helps build roofs and carry water. One day, he even laughs when a pig escapes during service and tramples the altar. You think he's going to make it. Still, there's tension. People remember the silence from the pulpits when things were worst. Some lean into faith even harder. Others walk away. No thunderbolt strikes either group. That in itself feels revolutionary. You're still not rich, still not free in the modern sense. But your world cracked open, and you peeked through, and something else happened. You found community, not just in proximity, but in shared pain, shared rebuilding, shared purpose. People helping each other not because they have to, but because they get it. Because when you've seen death up close, small kindnesses become sacred. There's talk of uprisings in other parts of the kingdom. Peasants burning manors, demanding rights, shaking the very foundations of the old world. You listen with wide eyes. You feel something stir deep in your gut. Not fear exactly. Hope? Hunger? You're not there yet. But you're closer than you've ever been. The world didn't end, not really. It just shed a layer. And underneath it, you found a version of yourself you never expected. Capable, clever, important even. One morning, you sit outside your cottage, sipping watered ale, watching the clouds drift like lazy sheep. You scratch the scar on your wrist where the fever blister once sat, and you think, I could do anything. You don't mean it like a noble would. You're not dreaming of castles or crowns. You mean I could build a new fence. I could mend my own shoes. I could teach my niece to read. I could help change things, even just a little, and in this world that feels like power. The road stretches ahead, dusty and uneven, and for the first time in years it doesn't look like a dead end. You wake to the smell of fresh bread, real bread, not the gritty acorn mix kind you'd gotten used to. Someone's managed to get proper flour from a neighboring village. It's still coarse, still dense, but it rises, like everything else seems to now. Your body aches differently these days, not from grief, but from labor. Muscles return where there were only bones. Calluses deepen. You notice it while lifting thatch onto a roof or pulling weeds from the corners of a half-claimed field. Life requires effort again, and the effort feels worth something. You've taken to meeting others in the village square again. Not the real square. It's more of a wide patch between two carts, but that's enough. You barter turnips for thread. A few kids kick a ball made of rags. Someone's selling ale brewed in a cauldron that once held sheep stew, and people are laughing. Again, not the mad, thin laughter of plague time. Not the bitter chuckles you used to hear over graves and ruined fields. This laughter is low and stubborn. Real. It begins in the chest and doesn't need permission. It fills the cracks. You look around and realize this strange thing has happened. You have a community again. Different from the old one. Smaller, scarred, quieter, but tougher too. Everyone who's here earned it. Every face is a testament, and every absence, a memory still carried in silence. You plant your seeds, the same ones you found under those rags weeks ago. The soil is stubborn, and you doubt yourself with every poke of the hoe. But the sun is out longer now. The days stretch. You can almost hear the earth sigh in relief. There's a boy in the village. You remember him from last year when his parents vanished. He runs past you now with a stick and a wheel, whooping like he owns the world. He probably does. The lord of the manor, whoever's left of that bloodline, hasn't been seen in weeks. And oddly, no one's waiting for his return. The fields are being worked. The taxes aren't being collected. And no one's exactly rushing to restore that balance. You've started sleeping better. Not every night. Sometimes you still dream of dead carts and coughing fits. But the nightmares are fewer. You dream more often of small things, of bread and goats and warm sun on your face. People have begun to ask things again, not just pray, real questions. What if we built a new mill? What if we opened the school again? What if we raised wages, like they did in that village up north? Historians still argue whether this was truly a golden opportunity for peasants, or just a flicker before power reasserted itself. But you feel it in your bones. The world is different. A man from another village tells you that in some towns, laborers are demanding coin before the harvest, not after. That laws are being rewritten to stop people from moving around, but no one's enforcing them. There aren't enough enforcers left. And the people are tired of waiting for permission. You hear whispers about things never dared before, about women who won't remarry, about serfs walking away from fields that no longer claim them, about new towns forming around old ruins. It feels almost dangerous, in a good way. You and your partner, if that's still the right word, talk about moving, or staying, or doing nothing at all. And for once, that uncertainty doesn't scare you. The worst already came and stayed a long time. You survived it. You both did. You sit under the stars, counting them not because they predict anything, but because they're still there, still shining, still immune to your tiny disasters. A dog barks somewhere in the distance. Someone sings again, louder this time. A child cries, then laughs. You hear a cough, but it fades. Not everything means death now. You turn over in your bed of straw and wool and warmth, listening to the world breathe. A quieter world. A bruised one, but one that lives. The wind outside your shutter carries no scent of sickness tonight. Only mint and maybe bread. You lie still now, eyes closed, body heavy in the best way. The story has settled around you like a soft wool blanket. Itchy in places, but warm. The world we just walked through was harsh, unfair, and full of unthinkable sorrow. But somehow, it kept moving. You kept moving, even in the silence of those empty fields. Even with the dead cart rattling past. Even with fear breathing down your neck like a second shadow. You found a way forward. You survived. Maybe not the same as before. Maybe with new aches, with new absences carved into your days like names on old stone. But you lived. And in your living, you stitched life back together. One seed, one roof, one clumsy, honest laugh. Let that sink in, because maybe that's what all history is in the end. Not the kings or the battles or the inked scrolls, but people like you, doing what they could with what they had, in moments no one thought worth recording, digging in the dirt, warming cold hands, holding someone, tight and daring to hope, so take a breath, a long one. You're not in a plague house anymore. You're not waiting for the next knock at the door. You're here, safe, listening, breathing. Let the weight in your chest soften. Let your thoughts stretch out like roots in warm soil. There's nothing left to do now. No carts to push. No cows to milk. Just the gentle hum of a world that always finds a way. You did good. You came through. And now, at last, you can rest. Sweet dreams.